There is no consensus among scholars as to whether the legendary figure Lao Tzu actually existed. In other words, some people believe that there was no real Lao Tzu and that his famous book, the Tao Te Ching, or Book of the Way, is just a collection of writings from many different Taoist thinkers compiled over several centuries. There are others who think this view is merely an outgrowth of an overly skeptical age in which we live, and that the historical Lao Tzu was in fact a real person. Chances are this debate will never be put to rest. As regards the old master's life, well, the oldest known biography of Lao Tzu was composed by the Han historian Sima Qian at the beginning of the 1st century BCE, several centuries after Lao Tzu died. The old master's family name was Li Er, and his posthumous name was Li Dan. He worked as an archivist for the court of Zhou sometime during the 5th or 6th century BCE. Lao Tzu may have been married, and he may have had a son named Zhang, who grew into a decorated soldier. Many Chinese with the surname Li, including the emperors of the Tang dynasty, traced their lineage through this line. In no traditional accounts was Lao Tzu the head of a formal philosophical school, though he is reputed to have had many followers. And on the subject of the Book of the Way, one of the most famous stories about Lao Tzu concerns why he even wrote the Tao Te Ching. Determined to abandon city life at the age of 80 to live out the rest of his days as a hermit, Lao Tzu was stopped at the gate of Cheng Chao by a guard who recognized the old man. The soldier begged Lao Tzu to record his wisdom in a book before he would allow him to leave the city. And so, Lao Tzu wrote the Tao Te Ching. As Taoism, the philosophy Lao Tzu founded, took root around China, some religious sects began to worship the old master as a god, or as the embodiment of the Tao itself. In some accounts, Lao Tzu was the Buddha's teacher. In others, he was the Buddha himself. Fantastical stories have been woven around his figure, such as how he was conceived when his mother looked upon a falling star, or that he dwelled in her womb for over 60 years before emerging as an old man with long lobes and a gray beard, which are both signs of wisdom in Chinese tradition. Whatever the truth of the matter, as the founder of Taoism, which is both one of the most important philosophical schools and most important religions in Chinese history, Lao Tzu's greatest enduring accomplishment was his book, the Tao Te Ching. In its pages, a poetic and deceptively simple philosophy takes shape, one irony at a time. Central to Taoist teaching is the Tao itself. The Chinese word Tao has no simple, direct translation into English. You might say that it means the way, the path, the law, the essence, or even nothing. The first passage of the Tao Te Ching explains the inexplicable nature of the Tao. The Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. A Taoist might spend all his life contemplating the Tao and yet never be able to satisfactorily explain it, because once it is named, it is no longer what it is. Another passage describes the nature of the Tao. The Tao is like a well, used but never used up. It is like the eternal void filled with infinite possibilities. It is hidden but always present. I do not know who gave birth to it. It is older than God. So, what is it that you want out of life? Peace? Happiness? Well, peace and happiness can only be found when one learns to perceive the Tao and adjust oneself to its flow. A good traveler has no fixed plans and is not intent upon arriving. A good artist lets his intuition lead him wherever it wants. A good scientist has freed himself of concepts and keeps his mind open to what is. Other than the Tao itself, the two most important concepts in Taoism are yin-yang and wu-wei. Central to the idea of yin-yang is the balance of opposites, light and dark, male and female, heaven and earth. Yang embodies the bright, the active, the male, the aggressive, and yin, the dark, the quiet, the female, the passive. One cannot exist without the other, and their constant movement and mingling is responsible for the nature of all things. To the Western mind, the concept may initially seem a little sexist, that male energy is active and bright, while female energy is passive and quiet. But this only stems from the Western preference for things that are bright and active. As for Lao Tzu, he took the opposite view. In the calm yin energy, the Tao is in fact stronger. Know the male, says the Tao Te Ching, yet keep to the female. Receive the world in your arms. Know the white, yet keep to the black. Be a pattern for the world. The Tao will be strong inside you, and there is nothing you cannot do. The world is formed from the void, like utensils from a block of wood. The master knows the utensils, yet keeps to the block. Thus, she can use all things. The literal translation of Wu Wei is non-doing. Put another way, it is the lack of action. That is, Wu Wei is action that follows the natural flow, action that is created through non-action. The Tao never does anything, Lao Tzu tells us, yet through it, all things are done. Striving too hard for something cannot bring happiness. Rather, flexibility, patience, and a willingness to go with the flow bring a person everything they could need from life. Plants do not strive to grow. It is simply in their nature, and so they thrive. Rain does not have intention when it falls, yet the land is nourished. So too must human beings align themselves with this proper and spontaneous action, which requires no special effort. Sometimes the term Wei Wu Wei is used, creating the paradoxical phrase action, non-action. The interpretation of the meaning of Wu Wei is one of the main things that separates philosophical Taoism from religious Taoism. The former takes non-doing quite literally, specifically to separate oneself from human affairs and to feel no desire to be a part of them, and to not even care what anybody thinks about that. The latter, however, that being religious Taoism, has interpreted Wu Wei as a strategy to gain political power. Most notably, the legalist school seized upon the concept of Wu Wei in order to rationalize their incredibly strict and tyrannical laws. The legalists believed that if the laws were good enough, then they would govern the people without any need for action from the government. There is no question that the legalist interpretation is a blatant conflation of Lao Tzu's intention. The master does his job and then he stops, wrote Lao Tzu. He understands that the universe is out of control and that trying to dominate events goes against the current of the Tao.